Today we will be discussing cleaning and sanitizing.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be working with really the heart and soul of what we do as brewers in our discussion of cleaning and sanitizing. In the introduction, that was my son Michael, very much doing it's kind of a newscastery kind of thing. I liked the vibe he was sending out. But anyways, to kind of look a little bit more big picture at what we're doing. A lot of times people see the brew day itself, the actual work production that goes on in the brew house, as what we're actually doing when we're brewing. And I don't think that's the case. Sometimes people think it's simply or as much an element of the ingredients that we use. And again, I think those things are factors that come after this discussion of cleaning and sanitizing. There is a term used in the brewing industry, and it is not necessarily a positive term, but there's this term where I could say that I was a mixed monkey. All right. When brewers use that phrase, what they're talking about is they're talking about somebody in the industry who knows how to make wort on a particular system, but they do not know how to troubleshoot. They do not know why things are happening in the process. They know to hit a certain set of buttons at this point and another set of buttons at this point, and so forth and so on. What I would like to do is, one of the kind of big goals of this class is I want to give this real overarching concept of what brewing really is from a day-to-day standpoint. And I think that this is one of the big keys to that conversation. I've worked for employers that felt as if that I could just brew and then we could have just anybody clean the tanks. And I think that shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what actually happens in the brew house. A good friend of mine, Bill Gerds, he is the head brewer down at Linwood Brewing Concern in North Carolina, won numerous major awards for his beers, an incredibly talented brewer. And when he was first training into the industry, he did not touch a fermenter or bright tank, the two primary tanks that handle beer. He did not handle one of those tanks until he was working in the brewery for a year. All right. Now, that might be an extreme instance of what I'm trying to show, but it doesn't matter the quality of the wort that you make on your brew day unless the vessel that you're going to be fermenting in is appropriately cleaned and sanitized. Okay? You can make the best wort that there ever was. And if your tanks and the equipment that you're using are not appropriately cleaned and sanitized, it does not matter one bit. Okay? We're going to approach this. Let me jump back real quick to that mixed monkey thing. Being a mixed monkey, there's nothing wrong with it. All right. Hopefully the goal is, because I think that's kind of a basic stage. If you don't come into the industry with an idea of how beer works, a lot of times you will just be performing tasks in repetition. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think at the same time, a brewer has a responsibility to push beyond that and continue to expand on their knowledge base and understand how they can continuously improve their product. We're going to discuss a cleaning and sanitizing from a couple of different viewpoints. We will start off from the homebrew viewpoint, and then we will expand that to the professional brewing side. The reason that I'm going to separate those two things is that in professional brewing, more often than not, you are using stainless steel. There are some professional breweries that will still be using plastic. It is not ideal. I do not believe plastic is ideal for at-home use either. Plastic is so porous. It allows oxygen ingress. There's a lot of things that it's tough. If you get small scratches in plastic, it's almost impossible to get it clean. You need a surface that is smooth enough that you can appropriately clean. That'll be a concept that we come back to a couple of times in today's lecture. We will be looking at the homebrewing side, which oftentimes will include anything from the range of plastic fermenters to glass on up to stainless steel. You can find full-on professional type stainless steel conical fermenters for homebrew use. I believe it's completely unnecessary. I believe you can ferment in glass just fine. One caveat when it comes to plastic is that there is like the traditional white fermentation bucket. It's food grade plastic, but there is a newer version of that as well, which is called the Better Bottle. And the Better Bottle, when properly maintained, does not allow as much oxygen into the beer, which is good. So yeah, those are kind of the range of homebrew options as far as fermentation goes. In order to clean all of those, the processes are really the same. We discussed in class when we were prepping our gear for our brew day that you need to use an agent like PBW, powdered brewery wash. That is what would be acting as your caustic agent or your cleaning agent for everything. On that package, you will see the appropriate rate of usage. It'll tell you, especially with caustic. Caustic is always, whether it's professional or home, it's always hot wash, hot rinse. Okay. If you wash with cold caustic, it's not going to be anywhere near as effective. If you wash hot but rinse cold, what you're going to do is you're going to run the risk of actually pulling scale out. Okay, so you'll leave a film on whatever surface it is that you're cleaning. That film can't be sanitized, and that's going to come to a really key point. The goal of cleaning in the brew house is to remove soil. All right? It's to remove soil. You cannot sanitize a surface until soil is removed from it. All right? So do not think that you can have something that's pretty clean, but there still may be some microscopic soil on it, that you can just hit it with some sanitizer and think that that's going to kill whatever it is. That's not really how it works. That can work in a situation where you are using pressure or heat. Sometimes in the industry, people will use a practice called, they'll call it like burning something out. At Rockford Brewing Company, how we sanitize our heat exchanger, which is the piece of equipment that is between the kettle and the fermenter. We run boiling wort, or 211 degree wort, out of the kettle through the heat exchanger. Cold water runs in opposite of it through really thin panels. And when the wort comes out of the heat exchanger, it's cold. It's room temp, roughly where you want it. And then the cold water that's coming into the heat exchanger acts as hot water because it transfers that heat, okay, exchanges that heat. How we sanitize our HeatX is we put a sizable amount of water into the kettle, heat it up quite hot, almost to boiling, and then we allow that to flow through the heat exchanger. In that instance, my boss is looking to get the heat exchanger and the transfer line off the heat exchanger that will run wort to the fermenter up above 180 degrees for 20 minutes because he feels that that amount of time will give us that sanitation concept. All right. if you're doing something like that, it is possible to have soil, a small amount of soil, still in the heat-X, but whatever it is in there would be sanitized. Okay, so you can also use heat as a sanitizer. Back to our homebrew discussion. We mentioned before PBW, giving a soak for however long it tells you to on the thing. Usually the more soil you have, the more time you'll need. You can combine just a static soak, which means filling up a fermenter with hot water and PBW and allowing it to sit until all the soil drops. And you can also do something manual. When I was brewing at home, I had a pump that would spray up the chemical into the top of the upside down fermenter, and it would rain back down. And the velocity of that cleaning solution, the caustic solution, hitting the walls and running down would clean it much faster. It's the same concept if you were going to scrub a dish clean or just let it sit underwater and wait for it to get clean. All right. That's really the primary cleaning agent that you're going to be seeing at home. They have some other products, but I very firmly believe that PBW product is really as good as it gets. Some professional breweries also use PBW, both for what I would call smalls. All of the little parts and pieces that you use throughout the day can be kept in a bucket. At the end of the day, you can hit all those smalls with hot water and PBW, leave it as an overnight soak, come in the next morning, and the first thing you do is dump that out and rinse and put your parts out to dry. All right. So there's a few applications, but people also use PBW for commercial size tanks too. I think there's more efficient things to do than using PBW in that setting, but you can. Also at home, you will see the use of Star San and iodine as a sanitizer. Pardon me. I was a big fan of, and as you see me use in class, I'm a big fan of Star San. We've talked about that a bit in class already. But basically, that's something that you want to mix with deionized water. Because it will last longer. It will maintain its low pH. It is acidic, so it'll maintain its low pH, and part of the thing that helps to sanitize is that pH factor that it carries. So as long as your Star San is staying clear and maintaining an appropriate pH range, it is good for sanitizing. I like to have a larger bucket or a larger container of sanitizer, and then even a spray bottle. I think a spray bottle is really helpful for parts and pieces that are difficult to get full coverage on, and things like that. It's even great for the homebrew thing where a lot of times you're brewing in the kitchen. You can clean the counters, hit it with some sanitizer, and you know you have a decently clean workspace to work with. Both Star San and iodine that we're going to talk about are really doing the same thing. In the fact that they are removing anything that should be a beer spoilage organism from a clean surface. Again, that's just a mix according to manufacturer's instructions scenario. But almost always, anytime they talk about a sanitizer, you're usually talking about a 2-minute contact time in order to achieve a sanitized state for whatever you are attempting to sanitize. As I mentioned before, this can move over into the home side as well, with depending on whether or not you're using stainless steel. But the chemicals that we use as professionals still have the same goal, but sometimes there's some additional stuff that you're looking to do too. Because when we're using professional equipment, it's almost always stainless steel. And you're turning or using that equipment frequently, hopefully, if you're selling beer, and so you end up in a situation where it's not like you're using less expensive equipment that if you have to replace, you just can. And so you end up kind of taking on this other role, brewing professionally, as also like this kind of caretaker for stainless steel, right? You just don't want to have a situation where you are somebody in that is working on a system, on a brew system, and just kind of hacking through it and not doing the things that are actually going to maintain the integrity of that brew house and of the equipment that you're using. There's a bit of detail that goes into appropriately caring for stainless, and we're going to start covering some of those a little bit right here. We aren't going to get into the real nitty gritty of the of chemically what's going on and things like that, and we're going to use some generalizations to help explain what the different chemicals you're using when you're using caustic acid, chlorinated caustic, peracetic acid, different things like that. How that maintains the quote unquote health of the stainless steel. So there's a couple of Michigan manufacturers of brewery chemicals that I'm familiar with. There is Enerco. Enerco is out of Grand Ledge, I believe. Then there's Broadmoor, which is out of the Grand Rapids area. I've worked with both of them. I think they're both very good, very helpful, very responsive. And the product lineup that they have is quite honestly very similar. They're going to be offering usually a traditional caustic product, all right? That caustic product you're definitely going to want to be using warm, ideally potentially in that 160 degree range. And they'll have a recommended dosage that you would be using. Just a quick note on, personal protective equipment. You are going to want to be using chemical resistant gloves, glasses, and such. Sometimes you'll also see for dispensing people have a shield like they have at the dentist, so you're not breathing in their face. You can have one of those as well. It is part of the argument for having long sleeves and long pants in the brewery as well, to help cover up exposed skin. I am not always the best with that, especially shorts. I really enjoy working in shorts because it's very hot in whatever brewery you're working in. But it's a bad move, and since I've been at Rockford, I've pretty much abandoned that practice of wearing shorts. One of the dangers is with wearing shorts is if you were to be hit with hot liquid and you're wearing shorts and you're wearing boots, especially loose fitting like rubber boots like we often wear, that hot liquid can get into your boot and burn you quite severely. So there's a wide range of stuff. So again, with all the chemical handling, especially the stuff that we're talking about on the professional side, we want to make sure that we are utilizing appropriate PPE. I think that's the personal protective equipment. So we're going to hit something that is full of soil. So say that we take a fermenter and we're going to clean this with caustic. We'll touch on it briefly right here, but we're going to use a process called CIP, or clean in place, meaning that you are filling the vessel with some measure of diluted chemical, pumping it out from the bottom and back in through the top through a spray ball that will sheet the entire vessel with chemical, returning it to the bottom, and it's just this loop that you start spinning, right? Again, you want hot water for this, for caustic, and different people have different preferred times. I've worked for people that 15 minutes of caustic is fine. I've worked with people where it's 45 minutes of caustic. That's very much up to it. It might seem strange that there's that much variation between what people do, but it's a reality. So you're spinning it probably at least for 15 minutes to remove that soil. You would be rinsing it hot then, okay, to fully remove all of the constituents of the caustic product that you're using. And then your tank is clean, right? You can let that air dry from there, rinse it once with water prior to using it, sanitize it, and then that vessel is ready to go. You have some different options as far as sanitizing on a professional level. You can use heat. Sometimes people will use heat for sanitizing, as I mentioned before. More traditionally, you'll see people using an iodine mixture in CIP, again, filling the tank, pumping out of the bottom, returning it to a spray ball at the top, and sheeting down. People will also use various amounts of time for that. And again, I would just recommend to follow manufacturer's instructions. You can use iodine. One of the problems with using iodine for a CIP type procedure is you are jetting it into the air. And one of the things that strips iodine out of solution, you'll actually see an iodine product. You can make an iodine mixture that looks copper. You can make it go clear by oxidizing it. If you leave it out overnight, it will not be as copper as it was when you originally had it mixed. If you were to take a bucket of sanitizer like that and just have it stirring constantly, you would see that exchange between the atmosphere and the turbulence of the top of the liquid. You would be flashing off your iodine and losing its sanitizing capacity. That's why sometimes people will like to use peracetic acid, Parasan. Parasan smells like the worst vinegar you have ever smelled before in your life. It is incredibly strong. You do not want to stick your nose in it and smell it. It will rearrange your sinuses in a way that you won't believe. Peracetic acid is also one of the items that if you get it on bare skin, I think it's one of the most punishing chemicals to get on your skin because it will just give big white patches, like white. It's not cute, and that stuff burns, and it does not want to stop burning even when you're rinsing it. So again, personal protective gear is really important for this stuff. Peracetic acid, Parasan, smells awful, but it does a really good job, and a lot of people use it. You do want to get rid of, as with the iodine, prior to sealing your tank up to put beer in it after it's sanitized. You want to get as much of that liquid out of there as you can. Used at the appropriate rates, they are both no-rinse sanitizers, meaning you do not have to actually flood that tank with water or spray it with water to remove it. That would kind of be defeating the purpose because you would be relying on your water source from the city or your municipality to be sterile, and it's not. All right. So that's kind of the sanitizing side of things. When you're cleaning a tank like that, a lot of times these stainless steel tanks will have ports, inch and a half ports that you can put a sample valve on, or you can put a carbonation stone in, or different things like that. It's really important during the CIP process that you hit the tops of those valves, right? Because if liquid is sheeting down the inside of the tank right here, this port is a few inches deep. And so you need to make sure to manually clean this. I've also put a valve on that so I can actually just shoot chemical through there, where I'll actually clean each one individually. And I think it's a little more time consuming, but it's a way to actually put some good turbulence of chemical past potential soil. So I think those are some good options. And to touch briefly on the concept of using acid in the brew house. Acid is, and this is not the most technical way to describe this, but it's a very practical way to describe it. Acid helps to create a smoother surface on your stainless steel. Okay? You all know that if you look at the inside of a fermenter or something like that, and you run your finger along it, it's going to feel smooth. But if you put that under a microscope, you're going to see it's full of pits and everything like that. Caustic itself can beat up stainless steel, all right? What the periodic use of acid washing a tank can do is it can actually make that tank a little bit smoother or seem less porous, all right? And there's utility in that. I learned that during my time at Gray Line, where they were concerned about the kind of the health of their stainless steel and the fermenters. And so every time they used them, they started a practice of they would caustic wash, rinse, and then hit it with acid, and then allow it to drain dry and leave the acid in contact. And then before brewing into the tank, before putting wort into the tank, they would rinse the acid off the tank and sanitize and go from there. What I found was in cleaning those tanks, the longer we were using that acid regimen, I was finding that I could actually manually spray the soil off the tank far easier. All right, it's not the exact same concept, but like if you ever tried to get soil off of a Teflon pan, it's way easier than a stainless steel pan, right? Without that covering. Think about it like that a little bit. And so that periodic acid run actually makes it easier for your stainless to shed soil because it's not as pitted as it normally would be. All right. And it's the pits in that stainless that allow soil to cling. All right. I think that periodic acid run is a really good thing for your stainless steel for the long-term health of it. You also have another product that I wanted to mention known as chlorinated caustic. At Rockford, the head brewer Jeff has a nice system set up to where periodically he's throwing chlorinated caustic at his equipment, and I think what it does is it's the addition of the chlorine makes there's a bit of foaming to it as well. The addition of the chlorine kind of throws a different chemical at the tank, which is another good thing to kind of mix things up. Sometimes people will make the recommendation that you should switch between types of sanitizers. So any kind of equipment that you're using over and over doesn't get used to one thing and then resistant to it. All right. That chlorinated caustic is a little bit more aggressive than the standard caustic. It's not something that you would want to use all the time because it really beats up your stainless. But if you have some hard soil, some staining, that's something that can help to remove those things. As always, if you have any questions about the lecture, assignments, anything like that, please shoot me an email. I look forward to seeing you in lab this week. Have a good one.